This lecture is about the overview of statistical language models, which cover probabilistic topic models as special cases. In this lecture, we're going to give an overview of statistical language models. These models are general models that cover probabilistic topic models as special cases. So first, what is a statistical language model? A statistical language model is basically a probability distribution over word sequences. So for example, we might have a distribution that gives today is Wednesday a probability of 0.001. It might give today Wednesday is, which is a non-grammatical sentence, a very, very small probability as shown here. And similarly, another sentence, the eigenvalue is positive, might get a probability of 0.00001. So as you can see, such a distribution clearly is context dependent. It depends on the context of discussion. Some word sequences might have higher probabilities than others, but the same sequence of words might have a different probability in a different context. And so this suggests that such a distribution can actually characterize the topic. Such a model can also be regarded as a probabilistic mechanism for generating text. And that just means we can view text data as data observed from such a model. For this reason, we also call such a model generative model. So now, given a model, we can then sample sequences of words. So for example, based on the distribution that I have shown here on this slide, we might, let's say, sample a sequence like today is Wednesday, because it has a relatively high probability. We might often get such a sequence. We might also get the eigenvalue is positive sometimes with a smaller probability. Very, very occasionally we might get today Wednesday is, because the probability is so small. So in general, in order to characterize such a distribution, we must specify probability values for all these different sequences of words. Obviously, it's impossible to specify that because it's impossible to enumerate all the possible sequences of words. So in practice, we will have to simplify the model in some way. So the simplest language model is called a Unigram language model. In such a case, we simply assume that the text is generated by generating each word independently. Now, in general, the words may not be generated independently, but after we make this assumption, we can significantly simplify the language model. Basically, now the probability of a sequence of words, W sub 1 through W sub n, will be just a product of the probability of each word. So for such a model, we have as many parameters as the number of words in our vocabulary. So here we assume we have n words, so we have n probabilities, one for each word, and they sum to 1. So now we can assume our text is a sample drawn according to this word distribution. That just means we're going to draw a word each time, and then eventually we'll get a text. So for example, now again, we can try to sample words according to a distribution. We might get Wednesday often, or today often, and some other words like eigenvalue might have a small probability, etc. Now with this, we actually can also compute the probability of every sequence, even though our model only specified the probabilities of words. Now this is because of the independence assumption. So specifically, we can compute the probability of today is Wednesday, because it's just a product of the probability of today, probability of is, and probability of Wednesday. For example, I showed some fake numbers here, and we might then multiply these numbers together to get the probability of today is Wednesday. So as you can see, with n probabilities, one for each word, we actually can characterize the probability distribution over all kinds of sequences of words. And so this is a very simple model. it ignores the word order. So it may not be effective for some problems, such as speech recognition, where you may care about the order of words. But it turns out to be quite sufficient for many tasks that involve topic analysis, and that's also what we are interested in here. So when we have a model, we generally have two problems that we can think about. One is, given a model, how likely we'll observe a certain kind of data points. That is, we're interested in the sampling process. The other is the estimation process, and that is to figure out the parameters of a model given some observed data. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. Let's first talk about the sampling. So here I show two examples of word distributions or Unigram language models. The first one has higher probabilities for words like text, mining, association, etc. Now this signals a topic about text mining, because when we sample words from such a distribution, we tend to see words that often occur in text mining context. So in this case, if we ask the question about what is the probability of generating a particular document, then we likely will see text that looks like a text mining paper. Of course, the text that we generate by drawing words from this distribution is unlikely coherent, although the probability of generating a text mining paper published in the top conference is non-zero, assuming that no word has a zero probability in the distribution. And that just means we can essentially generate all kinds of text documents, including very meaningful text documents. Now the second distribution shown on the bottom has different words with high probabilities, so food, nutrition, health, etc. So this clearly indicates a different topic, and in this case it's probably about health. So if we sample words from such a distribution, then the probability of observing a text mining paper would be very, very small. On the other hand, the probability of observing a text that looks like a food nutrition paper would be high, relatively higher. So that just means given a particular distribution, different texts will have different probabilities. Now let's look at the estimation problem now. Now in this case, we're going to assume that we have observed the data. We know exactly what the text data looks like. In this case, let's assume we have a text mining paper. In fact, it's abstract of the paper. So the total number of words is 100, and I've shown some counts of individual words here. Now if we ask the question, what is the most likely language model that has been used to generate this text data? Assuming that the text data is observed from some language model, what's our best guess of this language model? Okay, so the problem now is just to estimate the probabilities of these words as I've shown here. So what do you think? What would be your guess? Would you guess text that has a very, very small probability or a relatively large probability? What about the query? Well, your guess probably will be dependent on how many times we have observed this word in the text data, right? And if you think about it for a moment, and if you like many others, you would have guessed that, well, text has a probability of 10 out of 100 because I've observed text 10 times in the text that has a total of 100 words. And similarly, mining has 5 out of 100, and query has a relatively small probability, just observed once, so it's 1 out of 100. Right, so that intuitively is a reasonable guess. But the question is this our best guess or best estimate of the parameters? Now, of course, in order to answer this question, we have to define what do we mean by best. In this case, it turns out that our guesses are indeed the best in some sense, and this is called maximum likelihood estimate. And it's the best in that it would give our observed data the maximum probability. Meaning that if you change the estimate somehow, even slightly, then the probability of the observed text data will be somewhat smaller. And this is called a maximum likelihood estimate.